So, every year on January 26, India puts on this incredible display for Republic Day. We see the grand parades, the flyovers, the show of national pride, but have you ever stopped to wonder why that specific date? Why January 26th? Well, the answer isn't just some random fact. It's actually a story about a promise, a 20-year-old promise that literally shaped a nation's destiny. So let's dive in.
Okay, so try to picture this. It's a cold winter morning in Delhi back in 1950. The air is absolutely buzzing. India had been independent for about 3 years, but this day, this was different. This was the day it was about to make its biggest statement yet, not just to the rest of the world, but to itself. This was the day India would become truly sovereign, finally governed by a rulebook written by its own people, for its own people.
You can just imagine the energy. Cannons are booming with that 21-gun salute. And with that sound, the very last tie to the colonial past is finally broken. India is officially a sovereign democratic republic. Think about the history in that moment, with figures like Nehru and Sardar Patel watching on as Dr. Rajendra Prasad takes his oath as the very first president. A former colony had at last become a republic.
But wait a second. If India gained its independence on August 15, 1947, why the nearly 3-year wait? Why January 26, 1950 to become a full-fledged republic? Well, it turns out the choice of this date was anything but random. And to really get it, we've got to rewind the clock and look at the long, long road to freedom.
So our story really kicks off right after World War I. You see, millions of Indians had supported the British war effort. And there was this real hope, this expectation, that their loyalty would be rewarded with a serious move towards self-government. But what they got instead was a huge disappointment.
That 1919 Act was a total letdown. Sure, it handed over control of some minor things, like health and education, but the real power, defense, finance, foreign policy, that all stayed firmly in British hands. Then, in 1928, this all-white Simon Commission shows up to review everything, which, as you can imagine, was seen as a massive insult. The conferences that followed were basically just damage control, but it was too late. A spark had been lit. The demand for Swaraj, for real, complete self-rule, was now totally unstoppable.
And here's where things get really interesting. While the British were busy offering these tiny, piecemeal reforms, India's leaders were already playing a completely different game. They were thinking so much bigger. They weren't just asking for freedom anymore. They were actually designing what a free India would look like from the ground up.
As early as 1928, you had the Nehru Report, which was this amazing, comprehensive attempt by Indians to draft their own constitution. It was a huge statement. Later on, the British-made Government of India Act of 1935 gave a very detailed administrative structure. You can kind of think of it like this. The 1935 Act provided the skeleton, the structural framework, but the heart and soul of the final constitution, that was going to be purely Indian.
So this demand for a constitution drafted by Indians for Indians just kept getting louder and louder. And all that pressure eventually led to the creation of the Constituent Assembly, the group of people who would take on this absolutely monumental task. Right from its very first meeting on December 9, 1946, the Assembly was facing enormous challenges. The Muslim League, which at this point was demanding a separate nation of Pakistan, completely boycotted the whole thing. That meant only 207 members showed up that first day, a really stark sign of the painful partition that was just around the corner.
But despite the political storm raging outside, the work inside had to get started. Following tradition, the most senior member, Dr. Sachchidananda Sinha, was made the temporary chairman. Just 2 days later, the Assembly elected its permanent leadership, Dr. Rajendra Prasad as president and both Dr. H.C. Mukherjee and V.T. Krishnamachari as vice presidents. They were ready to steer this ship through some very, very choppy waters.
Once independence was finally achieved in 1947, the whole process of drafting the Constitution just kicked into high gear. And this wasn't just about writing down laws. No, this was about capturing the very essence of a diverse, ancient civilization and translating it into a modern, democratic document. Under the leadership of the absolute legal genius, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the drafting committee left no stone unturned. They didn't just look inward. They looked to the entire world, meticulously studying the constitutions of about 60 different countries. They were on the hunt for the best ideas, debating everything from fundamental rights for every single citizen, to a federal structure that could govern such a diverse land, to creating a secular state to hold it all together. It was all about forging a document that was uniquely Indian. Just let that sink in for a second. Almost 3 full years. 3 years of intense debate, constant discussion, and incredible dedication. Every single clause, every single word was put under a microscope. And this immense effort resulted in the longest written constitution anywhere in the world, a real testament to just how complex and ambitious the Indian experiment really was.
So how did it all finally come together? Well, the final draft was presented in late 1948. Then, after an entire year of non-stop, intense debate, it was officially adopted on November 26, 1949. And get this, the original document wasn't just printed on a machine. No way. It was handwritten in this beautiful calligraphy by Prem Bihari Narayan Raizada, with artists decorating every single page. It wasn't just a legal text, it was a genuine work of art.
Okay, so, if the Constitution was officially adopted on November 26, 1949, why did they wait 2 more months to actually bring it into full effect? And this brings us right back to our big question, and to the real heart of our story. The key to this whole puzzle, it turns out, lie in 2 words. Purna Swaraj. It means complete independence. You see, back in December of 1929, at this huge meeting in Lahore, the Indian National Congress made a really bold declaration. They were done asking for some limited self-governance inside the British Empire. The new goal was complete, total, absolute independence.
And that's the connection. The Congress Party called on the people of India to celebrate January 26, 1930 as their very first Independence Day. For 20 years, that date was this incredibly powerful symbol of the dream of freedom. So when the time finally came to enact the new Constitution, the leaders made a deliberate, deeply symbolic choice. They picked January 26th to honor the memory of that first declaration, turning a historic promise into a sovereign reality.
So next time you see the celebrations on January 26th, just remember it's so much more than the day the Constitution came into force. It's the celebration of a promise made 20 years earlier that was finally and beautifully kept. It's the moment that dreams of a long freedom struggle were literally written into the legal soul of the nation. It reminds us that the greatest nations aren't built on laws